They dot the skylines of our cities and have served as economic drivers for downtown and neighborhood business districts. We're talking about office buildings. Many that were once buzzing with activity, supporting tax coffers and other nearby retailers are now sitting vacant, inactive, unproductive.
Today, we're seeing a different phenomenon where buildings are 60, 70, 80% vacant. The more vibrancy you can create, the better it is for downtown. The more people we keep living within the city limits, being city taxpayers, that's good for all parties.
As our region continues to deal with the need for more housing, developers are finding a new purpose for some of these business centers: to adapt and reuse them as a place to live.
Look around. I mean, these buildings are everywhere down here, and they're empty. So you don't have to be a scientist to figure out that this is a great idea.
On today's episode, we'll take a look at some examples of this adaptive reuse strategy, learn about how it works, and whether this mode of upcycling our buildings has any constraints.
What you see is a combination of factors that have to come together. First of all, you have to have business and governance working together in conjunction to be able to provide housing.
So what kind of impact can collaborations like that have? Let's get into it. This is Brick by Brick, solutions for a thriving community.
Brick by Brick is made possible thanks to leading support from Deborah and Robert Chavez and Greater Cincinnati Foundation, with additional major support from AES Ohio Foundation, Lori Johnston, Susan Howard Foundation, the George and Margaret McLean Foundation, Diane and Dave Moshe, the Dayton Foundation, the Robert and Adele Schiff Family Foundation, and more. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to Brick by Brick, where we're highlighting solutions for a thriving community in Southwest Ohio. I'm your host, Ann Thompson. Right now, we're focused on solutions around the housing challenges in our region. One of the many indirect effects of the COVID-19 pandemic may turn out to be an opportunity for solving some housing woes. Spurred by shifts in work culture and remote work policies, as well as a drop in demand, there are now thousands of empty or underutilized office buildings across the country, including many owned by the government. And experts predict much of that square footage, whether it's private or public, may remain vacant through the year 2030. That's because they expect demand for office space to continue to drop, decreasing 13% from 2019 to 2030. CBRE is a global commercial real estate company. Local Vice President Steve Timmel has been tracking the data.
We're 22 million square feet in in Cincinnati's kind of core CBD. So if we do 2 million square feet of conversions, that's a 10% move. So that really can move the needles.
So what do we do with these buildings, and can they be used to address the larger demand for housing? In Southwest Ohio, dozens of them are waiting to be redeveloped. Cincinnati's vacancy rate is 20%, and for Dayton, it's 28%. Turning these buildings into something other than an office space is called adaptive reuse, and it's happening at a higher rate here in Ohio than in other states.
We've had some very active developers over the years in the market. Town Properties comes to mind, Al Nair comes to mind, that have done these conversions. But again, since 2020, it's ramped up significantly and significantly across the country.
According to CBRE's latest report, Cincinnati is number 2 in the nation, behind only Cleveland in adaptive reuse. However, it's not just those two. A number of our cities are showing activity with this approach, including Dayton. Today, we want to dig into this solution, specifically office-to-housing conversions. We'll be taking a look at several examples from our region and also getting a national perspective on the strategy. But a quick note before we get going, we're zeroing in specifically on office-to-residential conversions. But we want to call out that converting buildings of all types is nothing new. There's a track record of successful conversions of warehouses, old factories, churches, commercial spaces, and hotels throughout the region. You may have heard of these. And we think this will continue to play a role as part of the solution to add more housing of all types. Right now, there are about a dozen office conversions underway in Cincinnati and several high-profile projects in Dayton. These range from major office towers at the heart of our cities down to smaller-scale office building conversions. All of them have their own particular challenges, but in each case, the end goal is more housing. In Cincinnati, one really obvious example is what used to be the tallest building in the city, the Carew Tower. It's being converted to apartments and mixed uses. So is the former Macy's headquarters. Leading up those projects is Victrix LLC developer Anoop Dave. He says he can't comment on active projects, but told The Port in an interview last year, conversions are the talk of the country.
I think there's a lot of people that want to solve the problem of largely vacant buildings and turn them into something useful. There's a lot of discussion about it. What's unique about Cincinnati is there's also a lot of action.
When deciding where to do adaptive reuse, Dave studies the obvious, population and GDP growth, and the location of the building. But he also looks for historic buildings that are meaningful to the community, like Macy's and the Carew Tower.
Who hasn't shopped at Macy's and other its companies? And to be able to say, this is where a lot of interesting decisions were made that impacted people in small and big ways, and now you can live there. I think that's going to be a little bit of a special story in history for people that become residents of that building. And Carew Tower, it's there's really nothing like it. It verges on being a mascot of the city.
Dave says one thing that made Cincinnati more viable for adaptive reuse was in the due diligence phase. He says the city building department was extremely helpful, one of the better ones he's seen. Moving north, plenty of office to apartment conversions are also happening in Dayton. Some of you may have seen our Think TV documentary following the Dayton Arcade's renovation over the past few years.
It was a place we all knew. It was the heart of the city.
But for those not familiar, the Arcade is actually a collection of 9 buildings in the heart of downtown Dayton. At one point, it was listed for sale on eBay, but now has been renovated for many uses, including the creation of more than 100 affordable apartments for artists, as Cross Street Partners developer Dave Williams explains.
So we've taken some buildings that were originally residential, and we brought them back to residential. It was interesting if you look at the size of the spaces that they lived in back in the 1902 to 1970s. They were pretty small, so there was a fair amount of bringing some spaces together to meet local codes and our financing requirements and so on and so forth. But what we had is some great bones.
At the Arcade, the tenants are already moved in. Also in Dayton, the private development firm Windsor Companies has been very busy in the downtown area. It's recently opened new apartments at the Price Stores site, a 5-story commercial building that housed a clothing store for 70 years. It's also in the process of completing a conversion of the 22-story mid-century modern Grant Deneau Tower, which was the first modern high-rise built in downtown Dayton. The goal there is to create apartments and retail space. To dig into their activity a bit more, we're now joined by Brick journalist Hernz Laguerre Jr. Hey, Hernz.
Hey.
So, Hernz, you recently connected with Windsor Companies to talk about their projects, and I heard you even took a tour of the new Grant Deneau building.
Yeah, they took me to 3 different rooms. One that was totally stripped and ready for the renovation, another one that was in the in-between stage, and one that was totally done. They're transforming these spaces into luxurious apartments. Many people see adaptive reuse as a solution that helps with housing. We have vacant buildings that we need to do something with, and we need housing for people. So why can't we marry those two ideas?
It seems like an obvious thing to do. I mean, like you said, we need housing. What about all these vacancies downtown?
True. And another cool thing about it is that it helps the environment. You reduce your carbon footprint by not having to destroy and reconstruct all these buildings. But there are many challenges for developers who are trying to turn office buildings into apartments. We see that with Windsor Companies. I was able to see how they implemented creative and innovative methods to redesign the Grant Deneau. Take a listen. The Grant Deneau Tower, across from the Dayton Arcade, was built as a state-of-the-art office tower in the 1960s, but stood empty for a number of years. Jason Dorsey is the executive vice president of asset management at the company that is behind its transformation, Windsor Companies.
Hey, listen, we bought a tower. We bought a skyscraper, and we're going to turn it into residential, commercial, and restaurant.
And turned this mid-century modern office into a 21st century building, which is no small task.
Where does all the plumbing go? Running up through the middle of the building, or where does everything run? And these are all things that were, to me, the hardest, daunting tasks, engineering-wise.
On top of that, the tower was not so energy efficient. Because of the window glass, the building's heating and cooling costs were so high that no one could afford to make the building profitable.
So we gutted the entire building, all of the mechanical, and we installed a VRF system.
Alex Mano, Director of Construction for Windsor, stressed the importance of having energy-efficient glass. In addition to the Variable Refrigerant Flow System, or VRF, that Mano mentioned, they installed glass that was less thick than the original glass.
However, it's 4 times higher of an insulating property than regular insulated glass.
Oh, wow.
So they use these micro pillars in order to stand the glass off from each other. And then there's a lot more technology that goes into it that's even over my head.
It's amazing.
And on top of creating an energy-efficient building, Windsor companies had to follow strict building requirements because 20% of the $50 million project was being covered by the historical tax credits.
When you have historical tax credits, you have historical guidelines.
The skyscraper was listed on the National Register of Historical Places in 2016, which means they had to keep or work around some historical elements, such as...
We did have to preserve, there are these mailboxes within each floor. So that was one of the elements that were part of the historical requirements that we had to keep.
With it being a historical property as an office building, you could only put in carpet squares or concrete.
And they couldn't alter one of the most historic pieces of the building, its facade, also known to architects as the curtain wall.
But the biggest obstacle definitely is the curtain wall. It would have been easier. It wouldn't have been cheaper. It would have been easier to just build a brand, you take the old one down, you put a brand new one up, and you're done.
This sounds like a lot to handle, but this isn't the Windsor Company's first rodeo. They've worked on properties like this across the Dayton metro area, including the former Price Stores building at 4th and South Jefferson, the Journal-Herald building on 111th East 4th Street, and the Graphic Arts building at 221 South Ludlow Street. And they're able to accomplish this because their company is vertically integrated, meaning that it owns its own suppliers, such as plumbing and electrical services.
Vertical integration allows for 2 things, control and speed. So all of the labor is in-house. And then when you control that, you're not beholden to subcontractors.
And this comes in handy when you need to create items like mullion covers. Don't worry, I had no idea what mullion covers were either. A mullion is that vertical bar between 2 panes of glass. The grander nose mullions needed covers to complete the design Windsor wanted, but you can't go to your local hardware store or go online to purchase them.
We built custom-made mullion covers, essentially in our 3D shop. It even allows us to stuff in insulation here.
That would have probably been very difficult just to find.
You can't.
Windsor's ability to innovate while they develop is a skill set that allows them to make unique luxury apartments in Dayton.
It's a very high-end look. It's a very, my brother's like, hey, make it look like nothing like anybody's ever seen in Dayton. And I think that's what we did.
Shalinda Scales is one of the owners of 6 AAA Kitchen Incubator. The facility is housed in the Dayton Arcade as they provide resources for restaurants in the area, and they are a stone throw away from the Grand Dano. Scales shares what she thinks the renovated tower will do for local businesses.
What they're also doing is helping these small businesses become big businesses. So as we saw in the pandemic, a lot of these restaurants going out of business is because people were not residing here long enough to stay and patron the food businesses.
And for their next project, Windsor is not just looking into luxury apartments.
We actually think that might be the next step for us. Yeah, affordable housing and adaptive reuse. These big, tall buildings would be, they're safe. We make them efficient. We think that there's a great need for it.
Thanks for that story, Hernz. You really painted a good picture about how difficult it is to turn an office building into apartments.
No, it is really difficult, but what helped Windsor Company was the fact that they're vertically integrated. They're able to not have to go through subcontractors to do what they have to do, which may have been the reason why Jason Dorsey told me at the end that they're looking to do affordable housing as well. They haven't started yet, but that's something that they definitely want to move into.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that because in a lot of the examples that we have given and talking to developers, they're mostly focused on market rate or luxury apartments. And I was wondering how that would work for affordable housing.
Originally, I thought adaptive reuse would help with affordable housing because you already have the bare bones of the building. All you have to do is try to figure out how to turn it into an apartment, right? But I was wrong. It takes a lot to make it happen. Developers have told us, and that affordable housing is affordable for tenants, but it could be more expensive for them in the long run. But there is work being done in Cincinnati to transform an old office building into a mixed-income affordable housing complex. We're talking about the Barrister at 216 East 9th Street. I spoke to developers and partners to see how they made it work in the first place, and also spoke to a tenant to get his perspective on the project. Take a listen. These days, living downtown in any city is expensive, especially Cincinnati.
If I told you I was paying $2,500 a month for this, it's believable, isn't it?
But 54-year-old Todd Halsell, who just moved into the Barrister apartments, isn't paying anything close to that. Built in the 1800s, the Barrister building served a variety of manufacturing purposes, such as a shoe factory, production of printing presses, and eventually, it turned into some office spaces. Now, in the heart of Cincinnati's central business district, the Barrister is one of the most recent examples of adaptive reuse. The historic office building is being turned into affordable apartments, with rents ranging from as low as $400 a month to $1,400 a month. With steady employment as a plumber, Todd is able to afford the monthly rent of $900 a month, which is well below the market rate.
Central business district for a long time was really a dawn to dusk area. As we're seeing the revitalization from over the Rhine move in, we're seeing more residents move down here too. So as the popularity and the amenities down here grow, the rent has also grown.
Ben Eilerman, Director of Real Estate Development at Over the Rhine Community Housing, gave us a tour of the two historic buildings that make up the Barrister. What makes the Barrister unique is that it offers apartments at 30 to 60% of the area median income, making it the first affordable housing project in the downtown area in over 3 decades, which is one of the reasons why Todd is grateful to be a new resident.
Now, I've done it all, on both sides of the fence, from the hood to the Hollywood, from the block to the boardroom,
Todd was born and raised in Cincinnati, but as he became an adult, different jobs took him to Indianapolis, Atlanta, and even further out west in California. But there's no place like home.
I just wanted to be, in my city and have a place of my own name.
But Todd had difficulties passing background checks.
Because I did prison time for, drug charges. And once you get that sticker, nobody wanted to rent to me, no matter if you got money or a job or anything.
So Todd's housing situation was unstable until he crossed paths with the David and Rebecca Barron Center for Men. It's a shelter house for homeless men in Cincinnati.
And I went to the drive-in the second time, and that is when it changed because I changed my mind state.
Michelle Christopher is a caseworker at Over the Rhine Community Housing, where she worked with Todd.
When I first met Todd, he was well-spoken, well-groomed. I thought maybe he came here to work or something. You wouldn't think he came from the homeless population.
As Michelle and Todd kept speaking, Michelle heard someone that needed help.
He needs help in getting his life on the right track.
Over the Rhine Community Housing believes that every right track begins with housing.
That means putting them in housing first and working on their barriers.
Over the Rhine Community Housing had to overcome some barriers of their own to make this project possible.
Projects like this are expensive, and they're made more difficult by the fact that when we charge affordable rents, that we don't have as much money to pay off debt like a traditional project would. So of about a $16.5 million project, we had to go after all kinds of sources.
To get the money they needed, Over the Rhine Community Housing, alongside developer Urban Sites, enlisted low-income housing tax credits, historic tax credits, and philanthropic donations, all of which were necessary.
Buildings like these are hard. There's many challenges that are here. And so the historic tax credits help to offset some of those costs. And most importantly, the low-income housing tax credits make it viable for us to charge affordable rents here. This project wouldn't have happened without it.
LISC, which stands for Local Initiative Support Corporation, was one of the project's partners. Executive Director Kristen Baker says the Barrister is a great example of a for-profit developer and a nonprofit working together.
Over the Rhine Community Housing, they are a nonprofit entity, right? And so sometimes they maybe are not always able to draw down the capital resources that are required to do large multi-million-dollar housing projects. And you can combine the power of a for-profit developer who really brings a lot of expertise, and you can bring in that affordable housing expertise and development experience from a nonprofit affordable housing developer. It's really a great partnership.
We're fortunate to have partnered with LISC here locally and nationally to provide us a really attractive and competitive permanent debt on the project.
And with that lower rate, it meant that they could borrow more to get them over the hurdles to have this project cross the finish line. And there are many hurdles.
So development is not for the faint of heart. In the case of projects like the Barrister, which are incredibly complex with lots of different public financing tools involved, that requires a lot of different inspections.
Since the Barrister is designated as a historic building, they had to adhere to some requirements.
So the historic folks said that we could not build this wall out any thicker. Sometimes, when we can, we'll build the wall out thicker and put insulation in here. The historic folks, number one, said that that's something that we couldn't do.
Or there were supply chain issues.
A $60 electric breaker can hold up the occupancy and the completion of a building. This one, 6 to 8 months at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wait, what? A piece that cost $60 cost the project hundreds of thousands of dollars? How does that make sense?
And that is where it's been just so difficult, so frustrating to work in the current environment we're in.
But the hurdles are cleared. At the standing room only ribbon cutting on March 7, 2024, Mayor Aftab Purival highlighted the significance of affordable housing in the downtown area.
Projects like the Barristers that don't just happen, especially when it comes to truly affordable housing, helping to grow our city into a more vibrant community for not just some of us, but for all of us.
It's not easy. Living down here is expensive. That's why some feel like they won a lottery. And it's based on their income. I think it'd work out fine for Todd, because he's trying to build a life and stay on that path.
And I was always wanting an apartment right down here, from when I would be in trouble here at the Justice Center, or even when I was in the drop-in center. I'm like, downtown is really coming up, and I got blessed.
So for somebody like Todd, this is really a game changer, finding the Barrister as his apartment. I'm wondering, how popular are these apartments and how affordable are they?
I would say very popular. At the ribbon cutting, I would say a majority, maybe close to 90% of the units were already filled. When I spoke to Cynthia Bell, she told me that there were only about 3 more units that were left to be filled, but I'm sure that'll be taken care of soon. And in regards to affordability, these units are for folks making 30 to 60% of the area median income. That's about $25,000 to $50,000 for a family of 4.
And the apartments, as you were saying, are very close. They're in a prime location.
Yeah. It being in the heart of Cincinnati means many things. One, you don't need a car. Solid transportation between the bus, the streetcar. You can get around the city pretty easily with the public transportation. It's also close to a Kroger, meaning that your grocery needs are met. It's close to the Cincinnati Public Library. But I would say the one thing that the Barrister offers, which I think is a game changer, is free internet. Imagine people who are working from home, those who take their work home, or students who are working on a project. That is one less cost they have to worry about.
And they have limited income since they live there, right? And they may not otherwise been able to afford the Wi-Fi.
Exactly, Ann. But there's one more thing I do want to mention about the Barrister in regards to funding. So Before, the developers like Over the Rhine Community Housing and urban sites, they were able to use state subsidies and federal subsidies, right? So they were able to use the historical tax credits from the state and the low-income housing tax credits from the federal government. But the state passed a law saying that you couldn't double dip with both when working on one project. But, Ben Eilerman told me if he didn't have the state subsidies and the federal subsidies, this project would not have been possible at all, including the philanthropic donation. Don't forget about that too. So I think although what the barrister did was great, they're really a one of one. You can't replicate their model.
That's right. And so other developers, it's going to be a little bit more complicated for them going forward.
For sure.
Thank you, Hernz. We'll see you at the end of the episode.
Thank you.
Our region seems to be having a moment right now in using this strategy to bring more housing online. But there are some limitations to this solution. After a short break, we'll look at those through the eyes of a local developer who is actually working on projects in Cincinnati and Dayton, and also talk with a real estate expert who's watching the adaptive reuse trend nationally. Stay with us.
Brick by Brick is made possible thanks to the generous support of so many, including Murray and Agnes Seasongood Good Government Foundation, Rosemary and Mark Schlachter, the Camden Foundation, Patty and Fred Heldman, Dee Dee and Gary West, the Stephen H. Wilder Foundation, Judith and Thomas Thompson, a donation in memory of Frank and Margaret Linhart, and more. Thank you. We couldn't do this work without you.
Hey, it's Hernz Laguerre Jr., one of the team members behind Brick by Brick. Our new show is about solutions for a thriving community. But if you think about it, we all have a different perspective of what a thriving community should look like. That's why we need to hear from you. We want to know what a thriving community looks like to you. Maybe it's more housing, more parks, or stores, or even safer sidewalks. Whatever your vision, we hope you'll share it with us. You can do that by heading to the Brick by Brick show page on cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. There you'll find an audience question button. Just fill out the survey and that's it. We look forward to sharing your hopes and dreams with the rest of our neighbors in future episodes. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back to Brick by Brick. As we've been talking about, for a developer, converting an office building into apartments is an expensive decision, so you have to get it right. Think about it. There's limited plumbing and heating, and what about the middle of the building without windows? Estimates say only 10 to 15% of U.S. buildings can actually be converted. Laguerre Bradley thinks about those kinds of things as president of development for the Model Group. His development firm is converting offices into apartments right now at the Mercantile Building in Cincinnati and in Dayton at the Center City Building across from the Dayton Arcade.
What always seems to boggle the mind, and I'm in this every day and I still struggle with it sometimes, is you think, well, I already have a structure, I already have a facade, I have windows, I have these things. How could it possibly be as expensive or sometimes more expensive to rehab a building? And it certainly depends. The costs are equivalent or potentially even higher than a new construction project.
Part of his process examines whether the layout works for residential space. He says some buildings just eliminate themselves architecturally right out of the gate. He also wants to know how much mixed use is in the building. Restaurants and shops can be a driver for whether potential renters will move in. In Cincinnati, renovation of the historic Mercantile Building and the adjoining Formica Building on Walnut Street is underway. The Mercantile Library is staying. It has that famous 10,000-year lease. Bradley says the apartments are luxury.
Residents will actually have a unique opportunity that as they move into the building, they can select the historic early 1900s Mercantile Building. They can select the mid-century modern building and have kind of these different unique aesthetic experiences, but then come down to the arcade on the first floor and also a new rooftop amenity that'll be one of the more dramatic rooftop spaces in the city when that's completed with views of the river and skyline.
Some of the 174 apartments in the Mercantile Building will be ready for move-in this summer. We mentioned the Dayton Arcade earlier. Another project that Laguerre with the Model Group is working on is the 21-story Center City Tower. It's across the street and is slated for adaptive reuse, with a goal of creating hundreds of new apartments. It used to house the offices of Orville and Wilbur Wright and is not as far along as the Mercantile Building.
There's a unique aspect as well that is something we added just in the last year. We are taking, because the building is so large, we're able to take a portion of the building and design it specifically to senior affordable housing. Senior affordable housing is an unmet need in downtown Dayton, and we applied to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency for what's called bond gap financing, which allows us to use a 4% low-income housing tax credit. And so 80 residential units will be designed and targeted towards senior residents of downtown Dayton at or below 60% of the area median income.
60% AMI in Dayton for a single person is about $39,000 a year, and for a family of four, it's $55,000. As the Center City project takes shape, we'll be sure to keep you updated. Bradley doesn't expect to wrap up the financing until the first quarter of 2025 for Center City, so that's still a ways away. He is paying attention to some guidance the White House released last year. Nationally, the Biden administration is trying to encourage communities to do more with empty office buildings, government buildings, schools, warehouses, motels, and more. But will this work, and what are the limitations? Doug Ressler is with the real estate company Yardi Matrix. Hey, Doug, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ann. Always a pleasure.
Let's talk about the Biden administration plan. So what are the specifics as it offers up money to encourage these kind of conversions?
Sure. The Biden has an infrastructure bill that is still playing out in terms of money. They also have a transportation bill that's already been passed by the Congress that will allow for development in key areas. There's a couple of federal bills right now that are floating through the Congress that have yet to be voted on that are talking about putting money into the economy to be able to supplement or stipend affordable housing. Also, what you see is bills at the city and state levels that have been passed to be able to supplement.
Why is Cincinnati such a big player when it comes to adaptive reuse and in the top 10 nationally?
Sure. We really looked at the four cities in Ohio, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. And what you see is the profile that most of the properties that are currently under construction or permitted to be able to be adapted are very old buildings. So you've got a lot of space, a lot of underutilized old buildings. And the question is going to be asked, well, what do I do with those buildings? Can I repurpose them to be able to do more? In the Cleveland area, you see a lot of schools. Cincinnati, you see a lot of office that is being repurposed, especially downtown. And again, they're older buildings, 1920s, 1930s, some as late as 1960, but they really have good bones, good structure. And in many instances, those buildings were built prior to air conditioning. And so what we see is a lot of people, it's contrary to what a lot of people think, but older buildings sometimes make better conversion targets because being built in a time when there wasn't air conditioning, the airflow and things like that were structured into the architecture of their building can be easily adapted. Bricks can be undone, windows can be undone, things like that, high ceilings. It really plays well to the fact of converting it to today's benefit, especially for residential housing.
Yeah, you got right into what I was going to ask next when it comes to the limitations. So what makes this so expensive to convert an office building into housing?
Well, first of all, some of the cost drivers right now is the area zoned for residential. You have existing assets that are going to be converted to another asset. So the permitting and zoning, that's a cost. And can you get the local governments to be able to move on that? In other words, it's not just a matter of applying for a new zoning permit to be able to put residential into an office area, but it's also getting the concurrence of the local governance to be able to do that. In addition, you have construction loans are the primary vehicle that does this. Construction loans run about 8 or 10%, and you start paying interest on those day one. So you don't get any kind of relief or deferral time. And so what you've got to do is once you commit to this 8 to 10% type of interest rates, you've got to go forward, develop your product, and then you've got to turn around, inhabit it, and start gaining a return very quickly. And that's why people are looking for stipends or supplementals that help them in terms of tax deferrals, things like that. What you also see happening is people are looking at opportunity zones. There are a couple in the Cincinnati area that people are looking at to be able to place this. Opportunity zones, again, give you tax deferral. And so all those things, all those supplements are being looked at. And that's part of the federal bill that would actually provide a federal mandate to be able to supplement investment and incent investment in these areas.
Doug, what do you see going forward? Adaptive reuse is really popular now, ramping up. What do you see down the road?
Well, it's not a panacea. Again, it's building by building specific. And what you see is a combination of factors that have to come together. First of all, you have to have business and governance working together in conjunction to be able to provide housing, regardless of the alternative asset type. That's what you see playing out in D.C. right now, and you see some of that occurring in the Columbus, Cincinnati area. In addition, what you have to do is have a large density or a density migration pattern that allows for developers to be able to build in areas like Columbus and in Albany in the northeast corner. They're putting in the new semiconductor plants. That type of parallel effort by the city government fathers is really helping to attract employment, population, and density to those areas. The same thing is occurring in Cincinnati in terms of transit hubs, industrialization that's occurring. Also, Nashville is building electronic vehicles and some of the newer technology. The infrastructure bill that has been passed by Congress, which has a significant amount of money, still has a lag effect. You're not seeing all that money come into the economy yet, but you will. And what that's going to do, especially in the Midwest, where we see a very robust type of population and migration pattern, very healthy rates, you're going to see those population increases come back. You've got a lot of people that are auto workers or been trained as automotive that are going to benefit from the electronic vehicle industry and things like that.
Doug Ressler with Yardi Matrix. Thanks so much, Doug.
You bet, Ann. Thank you.
Remember, if you're interested in learning more about Brick by Brick and want to read articles, hear the podcast, and see Hernz's video stories, go to cetconnect.org and thinktv.org. Hernz Laguerre Jr. is here again. Time for takeaways. What were your impressions of this episode?
Development is not for the faint of heart, and there were a lot of details with both projects, with the Grand Deneau and the Barrister, but they both were approached differently. Windsor companies with the Grand Deneau, they're vertically integrated. So Windsor doesn't have to reach out to subcontractors in order to get the supplies that they need. So they were able to pretty much handle all of the issues that they came across, right? But when it comes to the Barrister, over the Rhine community housing and urban sites, they were held up by that switch issue I was mentioning earlier in the package. That one switch cost them months, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And for them, they're trying to create affordable housing. And one thing we realize is that affordable housing is not affordable to make.
And one thing is that the financing that these developers need could be about to get trickier. Banks may be more reluctant to loan money out because the prediction is in the next 2 years, so many of these mortgages are slated to mature at higher interest rates. So that could be an issue. In the meantime, the Biden administration is flirting with offering subsidies to developers, especially near transportation, turning some of these vacant office buildings into apartments. That could be additional financing. However, many people say if you're going to find a solution, look local. So it'll be interesting to find out what our local governments are going to do and what subsidies they can provide. We'll be following the issue.
For sure.
Looking ahead on Brick by Brick, Following the lead of other cities nationwide, Cincinnati city leaders are trying to create more housing by changing zoning laws. But the reaction is a mixed bag.
The concern is the proposed changing of the zoning to allow multifamilies in traditional single-family neighborhoods, potentially interrupting and ruining the quiet one-family house neighborhood.
These are big changes that are going to affect us, and I think it's important that I know what's going on. And it's important that I can lend a voice to the change, ideally a positive change.
What changes are being proposed as part of the Connected Communities Initiative, and will they work? That's next time on Brick by Brick. That's our show. If you like what you hear, please rate and review our podcast. We hope you learned something, and if you did, please share it with your friends and family. For Hernz Laguerre Jr., I'm Ann Thompson. We'll be back soon with more solutions. Take care. Our show is produced, hosted, and edited by me, Ann Thompson, with reporting and story editing from Hernz Laguerre Jr. Our executive producer is Mark Lammers. Our show consultant is Gloria Skursky. Gabe Wimberly is our audio engineer and mixer. Zach Kramer runs the lights and cameras. Derek Smith is our production specialist, and Jason Garrison is our production manager. Kelly May heads up our marketing and promotions, along with Mike Shea and Bridget Dillenberger. Alyssa Stevenson handles the website, and Steve Wright is our designer. Bill Dean and Andreas Kruja are the engineers for the show, and our chief content officer is Colin Shinamblo. Our music is from Universal Production Music. Brick by Brick, Solutions for a Thriving Community is a production of CET and Think TV, Southwest Ohio PBS member stations.